Welcome to another episode of the Trees and Lines podcast. Today, Caroline Hernandez, Assistant Program Director of Sustainability Landscapes at the University of Illinois, joins us to discuss how her work is affecting utility vegetation management, pollinator habitats, and making connections to better the industry. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Caroline. We appreciate you joining us for Trees and Lines. Been looking forward to having you for quite some time, so it's taken us a little bit longer than expected to get it to all work out, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about the work that we do. So thanks for inviting me.
Would you just start us off by giving us a little bit of your background? Tell us about Caroline, and then tell us a little bit about the working group.
I've been kind of all over the place, living and studying, working all over the place, all over the world, up until I met my then fiance and moved to Chicago. We could live together, and I found the job at the University of Illinois Chicago and Energy Resources Center. So it's a research institute through UIC, and it focuses on energy efficiency, sustainable landscapes. I was hired in 2018, and the working group, the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, had started back in late 2015, but it was still kind of taking off. And so I feel like I've been on it since the beginning, but I know there were several years before me. But it's been a fun ride to just see it expand.
You mind shedding some color? I'm kind of curious on your time in Ecuador, right? I know you were with the Peace Corps, but like why Ecuador? What sort of sustainable work were you doing down there? I just thought it was interesting. Like, was it a specific reason that you were?
Yeah. You did some digging. So I was in Peace Corps, and when I joined Peace Corps, it was not at the point where you could select your country. So I minored in Spanish. I studied abroad in Spain. I lived in Spain, so I spoke Spanish. And then I applied for Peace Corps. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do after college. And I had this environmental, studies background as well, and globalization background. And so they sent me to Ecuador because I spoke Spanish. It was kind of between Africa and Ecuador. They taught me Quechua or Quichua. And so then they sent me to a small indigenous community up in the Andes. It was really small, and so half of the time I was there, I worked with like small women's groups and worked on some like women's empowerment. And then I also worked at their school and taught about generally like don't bring your trash if you can, and like what recycling is, and things like that. And then the second year that I was there, I moved to a different city, and we worked in silviculture. And so it was kind of like a research organization. And we went to really, really remote, really, really tiny places. And we talked to the farmers that had done a lot of slash and burn work for their cows. And there was a type of tree that my organization was trying to get everyone to plant that you could actually cut off the branches. The cows could eat it, then they would actually have more nutrition, and then you were reforesting as well. And I liked that because I feel like every time you talk about sustainability, it's usually at the peril of somebody. If you have to cut somewhere, but I liked the idea of sustainable development where you can reforest while also taking care of the people too. And so that's kind of, after that, I went to grad school. Yeah.
So tell us about the working group. What was the motivation for forming it? What's its goals? What's it doing now?
So the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, it's a group of now more than 1,700 individuals, comprised of more than 400 organizations. But it started grassroots. It started with Iris Caldwell, my boss, just having some conversations with departments of transportation, utility companies, and they would tell her, we're really interested in creating and conserving habitat on our working lands, on our rights of way. But, we need resources. We want to learn from each other. We want to be able to, share share what we've learned, best management practices, things like that. And so back in 2015, she started hosting our, first Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group meetings. Started small. Actually, I think the meetings were still had about 100 people at them at the beginning, and then we have just been increasing. And now we're not just, energy and transportation organizations. We're academia. We're contractors, conservation organizations. We have really good representation from the federal government as well, state governments, local governments. So it's all, with the intent of supporting this conservation on rights of way.
Yeah. So as you look back where you've come from, do you see as the biggest accomplishments?
Ooh, that's hard to say because we've got our kind of flagship programs that we're really well known for, but I also just think the work that our partners have done, I think, should be is just as highly or just as important. And should be highly lauded as well. So one of our main programs that has got the most national attention is the Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances, and that's a voluntary conservation agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and energy and transportation organizations for the monarch butterfly. So the monarch butterfly is a candidate species right now. They're considering listing it as a threatened or endangered species. And organizations can enroll in this agreement that UIC is the programmatic administrator of, and commit to creating habitat on their rights of way. In return, they get assurances if the monarch is listed as threatened or endangered that they're not going to have to do additional conservation measures for the monarch butterfly. But really, it's about trying to get as much habitat on the ground as possible for the monarch prior to the listing or even to preclude the listing. And the numbers have just come out for the eastern population, and it's low now. But what our partners are doing is just really incredible. They've committed over 900,000 acres of habitat just through this agreement, and since it was finalized in 2020.
Just the eastern population, or also the Western population?
So, sorry, the agreement is the first nationwide candidate conservation agreement with assurances. And so anyone within the contiguous U.S. can enroll. And so then there are, of course, organizations on the Western half. I was just thinking of the Eastern population numbers that came out.
Is it fair to say then that you guys you're building the case for the importance of like habitat preservation and the importance of certain species, et cetera, and then the people that own the right of ways, whether it's utilities, transportation organizations, they work with you to modify how they engage with their respective right of way to ensure that the research that you guys are doing is being incorporated in their planning? Is that kind of the life cycle of how this works?
Kind of. I would say that it's kind of on its head. So I think of UIC and us as representing the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group. I think of us as kind of like the public servants of the energy and transportation organizations. And so we do have some research that we're doing, but a lot of it is just making the right connections. They're doing the work, making sure that they're getting the kudos for the work that they're doing. And so then we're creating the tools, we're creating the resources. They're telling us what they need, and then we give those and make those connections. And so I think they're doing the really important work, and then we're doing what we can to support them.
Do you then get funding from them? Is that how the dollar flows?
So we are open source on all of our resources. We are self-funded through the Energy Resources Center. And so the majority of the work that we do is grant funded. And so somebody tells me what they want to do, I go and find the grant, I write the grant, we get the funding, then we do the work. And then whatever we create is just on our website for anybody to access. And then, of course, we collaborate with other organizations, create resources like that to do that kind of research. And then the candidate conservation agreement with assurances, there is a administrative fee, so we can continue administering that. And so that is another way that supports the work that we do.
So let's say, Caroline, like I took your organization out. You guys don't exist anymore. Where would what would be missing? Right? Like how would the balance of the ecosystem shift if you guys weren't there?
I think we provide a space for these organizations to learn from each other. So it's harder to find, if a DOT wants to find a energy company that has succeeded in a certain type of vegetation management on their right of way, that might be more difficult. A lot of the tools and resources that we create and provide, of course, wouldn't be there. We've got some incredible, conservation partners that are working on similar efforts, but we do a lot of that connecting and focus just on the energy and transportation organizations. That I think is where we fill that unique niche.
So, how many utilities have gone for the CCAA?
CCAA. Oh, I wish I had gotten those numbers up. So we just received our 51st application this morning,
Wow.
and I think it's something like and especially with the pending listing decision in this fall, we're expecting a lot more applications and a lot faster, coming in. And so I think we've got like 37 utility companies that are enrolled right now. And then the rest are transportation agencies. But, we also have, it's really interesting, we also have organizations with private companies that have roadways and they're managing that vegetation on those roadways. And so they are eligible to enroll. We've had conversations with data companies that have, and they're transporting that data through pipelines. And so they're eligible to enroll. And so it's a really unique agreement just based on the eligibility and that it's national.
So could anybody that has any exposure to the specific assets, the right of ways, could they join this working group? Like, what is what has to be a part of the? What is the key critical part of the criteria?
You've got to have vegetation management control of a right of way. Of energy or transportation right of way. Yeah, because what we're looking at is how generally rights of way are managed, and then the conservation measures that you are doing on a portion of those rights of way, and then it should still have a net conservation benefit based on conservation activities that you're doing.
You're doing a lot of work around solar fields now, am I right?
Yeah, so one of our grants that we received a couple of years ago was from the Department of Energy, and we're looking at co-locating pollinator habitat and large-scale solar facilities. And of course, that does tie into, any of those energy companies could enroll into the Monarch CCAA, but we are looking at the economic factors of what is the vegetation management. What are the costs of the vegetation management if you're just doing your regular constant mowing versus you're going to seed it and let it lay for a while and then just do the maintenance and upkeep. We're also looking at the performance factors. So is it affecting, I guess effective is the solar panel. We're keeping that vegetation below the height of the panels, of course, but with vegetation under the panels, it can cause a cooling effect. Cooler panels mean more efficient panels. And so we're looking at that. And then we're, of course, looking at the ecology of it. So if we're creating habitat, what are we bringing to the solar arrays? Are we getting a greater diversity of bee species, of birds, of butterflies? And so we're looking at the ecology. And we're taking all of that information and we're creating tools for the solar industry, decision support tools for the solar industry of whether they want to implement habitat on their land. So cost benefit calculator, a seed selection tool, a scorecard for solar, and then an implementation manual, which walks you from the beginning. It's very thorough and it's a really great manual, but it walks you from the beginning of, is this the right decision for me, to like who you need to talk to, what kind of vegetation management you need to consider, what kind of seeds you need to consider, things like that.
Yeah. I run into your pollinator scorecard more and more.
Oh, good.
Well done. So
thank you.
Explain it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the solar pollinator scorecard is a spinoff of our standard pollinator scorecard. So it is a scorecard that we wanted to create a standard that could be used across the United States on energy or transportation lands, and help organizations track the quality of their habitat. And so there's 3 tiers. If you can essentially identify whether it is a nectar plant or not. That's the first tier. And then if you are, a biologist, you know what you're looking for, the noxious and invasives, the native plants, that's going to be the third tier. And so, we've got it on like a Survey 123 app. People are using it. They're using it for the CCAA. They're also just using it to track, how they're doing in creating and conserving that habitat. And I'll add that they're uploading that data into our geospatial habitat database. So that's a geospatial system where organizations can not only track the quality of their habitat, but they can track where they're doing what types of management. So they're doing, conservation mowing here, they're doing seeding here, they've got programs, and then they can even share that data on that database with specific organizations that they choose, and then you could even plan, your vegetation management activities to align.
So how big is your team? Because it feels like you guys are obviously you're creating this like ecosystem of connecting people. You've got data repository. You're processing like these applications. You're creating dialogue infrastructure. So like, what does this look like in terms of your organization and all the people involved?
How big do you think our team is?
Um, I mean, I'm gonna go based on the economy firing everybody. I'm gonna say, I don't know, maybe you're a team of like 7.
Okay. So we have not fired anybody.
Yeah,
For the past
I'm just
couple of
kidding.
years, it's been 3 people plus a bunch of student
Okay,
interns.
okay,
We've just hired
not a bad guess.
two more, which I'm super excited about. That we're growing our team, and it's making it so that we can focus on more projects and do other things. And then of course
Yep.
we constantly have our student interns who are really helpful and lovely.
Where are they interning from?
UIC, and so it's
From
nice that we
UIC.
can, yes, just support the students that are working there. So we've got undergraduate students and graduate students that are interning with us.
Oh, that's very cool.
Wow, I've watched that growth over the years. It's hard to believe you do that with 3, so
Yeah.
that's pretty impressive.
Well, and Iris
Yeah.
was doing it by herself for several years, and I mean, by yourself, we've had the support of contractors, we've had the support of other organizations, but she's worked hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like when I looked at your background, you have been in the sustainability space for quite some time, right? And so you find yourself here, where are you guys going to go next? Like it sounds like you're touching on some of the renewable assets. It's like it almost feels like it's not just right of ways, it's maybe all infrastructure and how its impact on habitats. Like what's the limit here, or what's the direction that you guys are headed?
I think that's actually a conversation we have a bunch. It's like, oh, we could do this and we could expand, but it's like, oh, we have a staff of 5. We should
3 people.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and because we're at the Energy Resources Center, and we are the Sustainable Landscapes program, but we still have this kind of base of energy. And so, we are, I think, staying within kind of that main infrastructure. We're developing another agreement similar to the Monarch CCAA, but it's focused on at-risk bumblebee species. We're specifically including like water infrastructure for that, and
Mm.
so still kind of the long, narrow passageways when we're thinking about how all of that is managed, but physically still kind of rights of way type of things. We've been doing a lot of work with different federal agencies. So we recently received a grant from the Department of Defense to help their military installations and support the creation and conservation of pollinator habitat on their lands. Having conversations with the EPA on pesticide use.
Is that something that they become aware of and they know that you're in the market, or you're reaching out to them for grants and for more work?
I think it's a little bit of both. So we have a good relationship with people of different organizations. We attend conferences, we present at conferences. So if they're presenting about something and we see something that I think matches what we're interested in, we'll reach out to them and vice versa. And I think we just try and do regular check-ins with the people that know our work and want to keep tabs on what the energy and transportation industry is doing.
You mentioned 37 utilities. Can you give us a little bit of a demographic breakdown, mostly within the Midwest, in Northeast, or are we talking 37 across the country? Are there co-ops, or like what does the mix look like?
And that's just 37 for the Monarch Agreement.
Oh,
So
for the Monaco Agreement. Okay.
we've got representation from more than 400 organizations across the U.S. and Canada.
Whoa.
And
Oh, wow.
so yeah, it's just the Monarch Agreement that those
Sorry,
37
I missed that.
organizations have enrolled in that agreement and agreed to this voluntary conservation. But
Okay.
I would say, yeah, across the country, in Canada, we've got a chapter of the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group in Canada as well, and so they're doing similar efforts, but we support each other as much as possible too.
So you got these millions of acres under management. I have no idea what the number would be.
Yeah.
A lot of integrated vegetation management that uses pesticides. So do you have a position on that, or what is your thinking around how can people improve habitat? Do they have to? What are the concerns? What are the benefits?
There's a lot of research out there that we have not done, but that we've seen, and we support that research. So I'm thinking of like Carolyn Mahan is doing a lot of research on integrated vegetation management, and from what we see, if you are using pesticides to target the noxious and invasive species on your rights of way, then it is creating a space for the native species to come back and thrive and then support the pollinators. And so even in the CCAA, for example, one of the conservation measures that you can do is use targeted herbicides for the noxious and invasive species, and then create that habitat. And so it's very challenging to manage a right of way and try and get rid of the woody species, the invasive species, the noxious species without herbicides. And so I think the fact of the matter is that they need to make sure that there is no disruption in their utilities that they're providing. And then we can encourage them to do so while also creating native or supporting native habitat for pollinators.
That game you mentioned, Caroline.
Yeah,
The
Game Lands
Game
33.
Lands
Thank
33
you.
website
Uh-huh.
that just has such great information about the impacts. So
Yeah. We ended up having a conversation that, man, it would be great to have a Game Lands 33 in different eco regions, different parts of the country. And so that's still kind of in the back of our heads of like, if we can find the right people, we would love to push that and support that. And I'll write the grant for that. Like you tell me the people that are willing to do it, and I will write the proposal for that, because it's well needed to see it in the Southwest where it's drier, and they have to deal with different species and different vegetation management activities.
How many grants are you writing a year?
Let's see, I probably wrote 4 or 5 last year, 5 maybe.
Can you
So
give us a sense of like what sort of dollar amounts we're talking about here?
oh gosh, so anywhere from I'd say the lowest dollar amount that I wrote a grant for, and it was a small grant, thankfully, but I think it was $5,000.
Okay.
And then we also wrote a proposal. The DOE proposal is for over $1 million, and so it depends on the project. It depends on our partners, and we've got like a small Chicago-based working group that's modeled off the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, and that obviously takes a little bit less money than some of the other things that we're doing.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
Working on military bases, and
Yeah, that was one of them.
You're into everything.
Oh
So
gosh,
what are you doing there?
That's where we're helping the DoD. They're concerned about the monarch butterfly. They've got so much land, so we're looking at, can we support energy and transportation lands on DoD installations to enroll in the CCAA, and then what can we do to support the collaboration of both organizations to also work with Fish and Wildlife Service and limit take of threatened or endangered species. Or at-risk species, make it easier for conservation. So whatever we can do to make their lives easier, to just do a spot herbicide treatment or timed mowing or things like that, then that's what we're looking to do.
Do you think that your work and your scope will extend to things like offshore wind, its impact on, or offshore storage, offshore solar? There's all this. I know Nextera and FPL have a lot of interesting studies going on and investments going on with some of these type of projects, and they have an incubator with some technology that focuses on desalination. Really interesting things, but obviously that has a huge impact on environmental elements, right? And so, are you guys limited to stuff that's on land and stuff that's specifically, again, tied to right of way, or will you dive into all sorts of things that affect species, fish species, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are predominantly focused on pollinators, and so I think we have explored, and we there's plenty of interest from our partners that are looking at turtles and
Other
snakes
things.
and things like that. And a lot of the work that they're already doing for pollinators benefits them. Um,
Hmm.
we haven't really discussed offshore, but some of the partners that you named are also doing working with us on other projects. And so I'd say the other thing that we're just starting to hear conversations about is like ESG reporting and things like that. And that's something that I think we're also interested in exploring. And we've got a task force with the geospatial database to look at how we expand that database to potentially support some of those needs as well.
Give you a chance to give a plug here.
Yeah.
I know the working group does quite a bit of educational opportunities for people. You've got webinars. I know I've attended the work or the annual meeting. So tell us a little bit about how people can engage and what the plan is for those.
Yeah, so we obviously took a break during of our meetings during COVID, but we are back, and we have been actually co-hosting the last two meetings. We've got one coming up in 2 weeks with Monarch Joint Venture, and this upcoming one is also with Farmers for Monarchs, and so it's going to be a really neat meeting. We have representation from three of the largest non-federal landowners or land managers, across the U.S. You've got energy companies, DOTs, and then farmers, all meeting together for conservation. And we plan on continuing these types of meetings on a yearly basis. And then we also host webinars. We know there's a lot of really interesting research that's happening out there, and just on the ground work. And so we find those organizations, yeah, and so we've been hosting like a research roundtable where we get newly published research. We get those researchers on, they talk about it, and then we have breakout sessions, and people discuss where this research could be used, but also where there are still gaps and where the next steps for the research. And then we've got case studies and things like that. We know this organization, this DOT, this energy company is doing something really cool and really unique, and we want to share about it. And so all of that, plus all of our projects and everything, can be found on our website. And we've got a YouTube page, but I would just recommend our website to find everying there.
No, this is great.
Yeah, we appreciate your joining us.
Yeah, you're gonna have to let us know also how we can kind of engage with some of your material, and maybe even at some of your meetings. We'd like to see how we can also get involved, and if there is a way to get involved, and just even hear the discussion.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to learn and glean from what you guys are doing. So
Yeah,
So
love
you
to have
want
you.
to, we have a lot of asset managers listening in. Any encouraging words, or what would you like to see out of the where the utility, pipeline, electric,
Just that I'm a huge fan of their work, especially when they're doing it for the benefit of the environment. And it always just takes one person to have that interest and to start that ball rolling. And there's usually a lot more people that are interested but haven't spoken up yet. So you're definitely not alone. And to join the working group and to get the support, however we can support you, and keep doing the good work that you're doing.
Yeah, I'll reinforce that. It's just interesting to me how, many utilities might not be focused on it. But if there's one person at that utility that has a passion, then that utility will have a passion in a year from now. So if you're out there and you're interested, speak up and encourage your coworkers.
Yeah.
No, it was great. Thank you, Caroline. Really great.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.